and welcome to Ephemera. I am fantasy author Katie Brisky.
And I'm editor Jen R. Albert. We welcome you, and we hope you are enjoying our theme music courtesy of Alex White. Welcome to anybody joining us for the first time, and welcome back to those who have visited our virtual home before. For those who are new, Ephemera is an award-nominated reading series chaired by Katie and myself.
Pre-COVID, we held events in the Glad Day Bookshop. And while we await our triumphant return, we are glad to pass through this pandemic penumbra with you, yes, you, right here on YouTube. And we would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which I live and work is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. This land is covered under Treaty 13 and is part of the Dish with One Spoon.
And the land on which I live and work is situated upon the traditional territories of the Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Mississaugas, and is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant. Additionally, this land is covered by the Between the Lakes Purchase, 1792, between the Crown and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. Our theme today is Penumbras. These are spaces of partial illumination between shadow and light, or something that covers, surrounds, or obscures. It's easy to see how this might apply to the Canadian government and the Catholic Church's decades of obscuring the devastating truths of the history of residential schools in Canada. And now the abuses have come to light. The Church and government authorities have come forth with apologies. On July 24th, Pope Francis will begin what he calls a pilgrimage of penance to various locations in Canada to address Indigenous communities and residential school survivors regarding atrocities committed by the Catholic Church in cooperation with the Canadian state. And though these leaders, leaders of several Indigenous communities have expressed relief at this visit, there have been questions about how much this is lip service by the Church, and what authorities are going to do to exact concrete change now. Grand Chief Garrison CT noted the apology is one thing. It's one thing to say you're sorry, but what do you do to reconcile with that apology? That's something that should be discussed going forward. An apology from the Pope was one of the 94 calls to action prompted by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, but many more that would make real and immediate difference to Indigenous communities go unfulfilled, including enacting more effective Indigenous child welfare legislation, making changes to the criminal justice system, enacting an Indigenous Languages Act, and allocating promised funding to communities. Indigenous Watchdog, which is a nonprofit that educates Canadians on the current state of Indigenous relations and reconciliation, considers only 11 of these calls completed after 7 years as of July 2022. The government's trying to claim a better track record than that, further obscuring the issue. But Indigenous Watchdog and other bodies conducting research into this are not convinced. 7 of the calls to action are now considered are considered completed by the government have been declared to be incomplete by 3 independent bodies. All 3 unanimously said that these 7 things that the government said have been done have not been done after their independent investigations. Symbolic apologies bring some of this to light from the dark. It is a dark ongoing situation, but apologies only go so far. Institutional change remains elusive at the government level, at the corporate level, in the Church. I'll share Indigenous Watchdog's findings in the chat. They're the most updated right now. And as always, we urge you to support local Indigenous communities and advocate for concrete change wherever possible.
Thank you, and welcome once again, everyone, to our July event. We'd like to continue with a reminder and some exciting news, which is that voting for the Aurora Awards remains open until July 23rd, which is this Saturday. Canadians who have membership in the Canadian Science Fiction and Fantasy Association can vote for Ephemera under Best Fan Organizational.
The Auroras themselves will be presented on August 13. So by the time we meet again, we will either be toasting Prancy's victory or equally, we will be toasting the well-deserved victory of one of our colleagues on the ballot, along with celebrating a whole host of incredible Canadian authors, artists, creatives. Please go vote.
Speaking of Prancy, our beloved skeleton deer friend, he has left me a very curious note. He says, "I have gone through a door unlocked with the key of imagination. Beyond it is another dimension, a dimension of sound, a dimension of sight, a dimension of mind, I'm moving into a land of both shadow and substance, of things and ideas. I've just crossed over into the
Twilight.
Penumbra zone.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that was a thing.
And yet it totally is, and Prancy has found it.
Okay. Well, hopefully we can catch up with him later. In the meantime, I would like to introduce our first reader. Chinelo Onwualu is the co-editor of Anathema Spec from the Margins and co-founder of O Menana, a magazine of African speculative fiction. Her short stories have been featured on Slate.com, Apex Magazine, Uncanny, and Strange Horizons. What a lineup! As well as in several anthologies, including the award-winning New Sons original speculative fiction from people of color. She's been nominated for the British Science Fiction Awards, the NOMO Awards for African Speculative Fiction, and Short Story Day Africa Award. She's from Nigeria, but lives in Toronto with her partner and child. And she's always happy to pet your dog. Welcome, Chinelo.
Thank you so much for having me. So the story that I'm going to read tonight was originally published in Uncanny Magazine, and then that is my 2-year-old, and then republished in the year's Best African Speculative Fiction collection, edited by Ohenechove Donald Epeki. And it was just announced as a World Fantasy Award finalist. So, yay! Exciting news. The title of it is A Love Song for Herkenel, as composed by Ashkenaz amid the ruins of New Haven. I slammed the car door with more force than I mean to. It's childish, but I don't care. I want Ashkenaz to see how angry I am. But my sister pretends not to notice. Don't worry about the supplies, Herkenel, Ash calls with the false cheer she adopts when I am upset. I'll get Haba to bring them in. I don't bother telling her that I had no intention of helping her in the first place. Instead, I storm past her and unlock the door of the front lobby. And there they are, all 6 of them, lounging on the leather settees across from the registration desk, as they have for the last 2 weeks. They no longer bother playing the penitents with me. They know it won't work. They only put on their act for Ash, whose indulgence, they are aware, is all that keeps them from the void of the lower depths where they belong. They look like typical wood sprites, except they're not. Something has corrupted them, and now they are like walking trees carved out of ice, their faces abstract sculptures. They radiate a cold that's almost solid. And even if my sister and I didn't have the sight, we would still be able to feel the unpleasant clamminess that they bring to any space. I know this because we haven't had any guests since they arrived. I've lost count of the number of people who've walked in here looking for a room and then found some excuse to leave as quickly as possible. They are killing our business, and for some reason, my sister doesn't seem to care. Aren't you supposed to be in room 306? I bark at them. It was Ash's idea to have them act as ACs for the Tokoloshe, who'd been complaining that his room was too hot. But they've yet to make their way to the first floor, talk less of the third. They begin a chorus of laments, but I tune them out. I tune out their tired excuses and begin prepping the front desk for the day. We both know they're lying. Hell, I'd known they were lying when they first arrived, telling a woeful tale about how the accident destroyed their ancestral forest far to the north. I seethe, remembering Ash's cheerful dismissal of my protests at the time. There's a reason for everything, even if we can't see it, she'd said, flashing that brilliant smile of hers. Don't worry, it'll work out. The old Ashkenaz would never have let such obvious dupes pull that nonsense with her. Granted, I was the brains and she was the body, but she'd always been sharper than she let people think. I would plan the scams, and she would execute. Rick and Lace, they called us then. Sisters of no mercy. The front door dings as she enters, loaded down with foodstuffs and cleaning supplies. I pretend to review the guest register, ignoring her as she huffs towards the kitchen in the back. The spirits erupt in a chorus of effusive greetings when they see her, and she beams in response. I notice that none of them offer to help her, though. I kiss my teeth at the farce. The spirits pretend not to hear. Haba, Ash calls from the kitchen. Haba cook. Come and help mommy with these things. The little girl sidles out from wherever she's been hiding. It's a disconcerting habit of hers. One moment you think you're alone, then you turn around and there she is, staring at you with those odd yellow eyes of hers. I've never really taken to her. She looks nothing like either of us. Small-boned and ebony, where we are both full-bodied and warm earth. And where other 6-year-olds chatter and laugh, she seems to hoard her words, only wheezing quietly when one of her secret schemes has come to pass. Our grandmother would have called her an Obanje, a spirit child with one foot in our world and another in the afterlife, one who torments their mother with multiple births that all end in death. Except she's Ash's first and only child, and it was an easy birth. As usual, her clothes are filthy and her hair is a naughty mess, because she won't allow anyone to touch it. I eye her suspiciously. What has she been up to now? I suspect I'll find out in due time, when the complaint reaches me. As if reading my mind, she hunches her shoulders as she passes, skittering into the kitchen like some sort of furtive insect. I sigh. The accident changed so much for us, though I suppose it changed things for everyone. I turn on the supernatural scroungers across from me. So, you people just balanced yourself here for the whole day. You didn't do anything again. Madame, it's not like that. They cringe and apologize profusely, and I let loose a tirade of insults on them. It won't dislodge them from their perch, but it'll make me feel better. I know he's bad news the moment he walks through the front door. I don't need the sight to tell me that. From the middle-aged potbelly that speaks of more cheap beer than wine and sense, to the expensive suit several sizes too small. Then there's the overly shined leather shoes, the oversized gold watch, and the heavy cologne that assaults me long before he gets to the desk. I know. He surveys our small lobby with a disapproving sniff, as if he's used to more luxurious digs. I stiffen. The Spirit Inn isn't much, but it's clean, and I've worked hard to decorate it with locally made handicrafts. Some people just have no taste. On top of that, he's untouched. How did he even find the place? The untouched shouldn't even be able to read our sign. Then the girl slips in from behind him. As she hurries to join him at the desk, she glances at the settee and shivers. And I understand. She's at least half his age, if not younger. Her makeup has been carefully applied to make her seem older, but her face has yet to shed its childhood fullness. She's dressed like a Run's girl, her skin artificially lightened, her fall of human hair expertly styled, a bodycon dress that seems to have been sprayed on, and high heels that could double as weapons. They're so sharp. I force my mouth into a chirpy smile. Good evening! Ha! This your AC is something else, the man booms. I catch the wisp of grey discomfort that he squashes down with green lust and yellow arrogance. Una fit on am small, off am small now. With this heat, is it not better like this? I fake a laugh. The man joins in. Of course he only wants one night. Of course he only wants our expensive rooms. And as he fills out the registration form, I take a closer look at the girl. No doubt about it, she's touched. But she doesn't seem to share the sight. I wonder what her gift is. Her aura is the dark blue of sadness, but that's not unusual for girls in her profession. I call Big Goliath to show them to their room, and just as the old shapeshifter shuffles forward to lead them up the stairs, the girl's aura turns the black of despair. I sigh. It's going to be a long day. I decide to keep the front desk open through the night, though I usually close it by 9 p.m., and I leave the late shift to Big Goliath. We rarely have more than a few guests at a time, and at night, most of them are out doing their business. If there's any trouble, he always knows where to find me. Tonight, I sense that something big is about to bust. It might be more than the old shapeshifter will be able to handle alone. By 10 p.m., I'm sitting in the back room with a cup of Kenyan black tea, which Big Goliath has thoughtfully provided me, and I'm trying to decide when would be a good time to check on the girl and the man in the suit. I haven't heard from either of them since they checked in. That's not unusual. Some clients are eager to show off their wealth, ordering our most expensive meals and overpriced drinks. Others are more focused on getting down to business as quickly as possible, sneaking out when their deeds are done. The man in the suit had struck me as the former, an inveterate boaster who seemed desperate to be more important than he actually was. That he hadn't ordered so much as a bottle of water worried me more than I cared to admit. I catch a movement in the corner of my eye and I whip around. It's only Habakkuk, crouched on her haunches in the corner and blinking up at me. I have no idea how long she's been there. I'm mad y'all have fire you this child. I roar, but there's no real anger to it. My mind is too preoccupied. How many times have I told you to knock before you enter here? The little girl is unfazed by my empty show of temper. I don't know how she does it, but she always seems to know when I'm truly angry and when I'm just being dramatic. Mommy is asking if anybody is still eating today. She wants to close the kitchen. I sigh. I suppose now is a good time as any to head upstairs. I send Habakkuk to call Big Goliath, and when he arrives, we start towards the penthouse on the 4th floor. I hear the low wailing as soon as we clear the landing. It seems to echo and thrum, settling into my bones like a bass. I know it's not physical, and I hurry to the penthouse door, knocking harder than I mean to. The man takes a little too long to answer. When he does, he's clothed in nothing but a towel, a thick carpet of hair running to grey across his sagging chest. What is it? He bellows, but I note his aura is blue with fear, though tinges of red rage still shoot through it. Whatever happened, it's over now. A dark feeling of dread settles in the pit of my stomach. Good evening, sir. I stretch my face into as much of a smile as I can, straining to look past him into the darkened room. We are about closing the kitchen. Is there anything I can get you? I'm okay, he snaps, and he turns to close the door. But Big Goliath places a hand on it and forces it open. The man narrows his eyes at the surprising strength of the old man, but the shapeshifter keeps his expression mild and slightly vacant. What of your guest, sir? I ask. Would she like anything? The man's expression goes dark, and he steps towards me, pushing his bulk out in front of him. I suppose the move is meant to intimidate, but it has little effect on me. I've taken on worse than this little man. His stomach presses into my chest, but I don't budge, and neither do my smile or my gaze. This unnerves him. She's okay also, he says, and takes several steps back. He tries closing the door again, but Big Goliath has it open. His anger is gone now. It's all fear. No, it's terror. If you change your mind, please let us know, I say in my cheeriest voice. The man nods quickly, and only then does Big Goliath take his hand from the door and allows him to close it. Did you see her in there? I ask him. The room was too dark for my human eyes, but the shapeshifter's preferred form is a massive wolf, and he has always had good night vision. He shakes his shaggy head, and my foreboding deepens. She could have been in the bathroom, I tell myself, though I didn't hear any water running, and the old plumbing of the toilet was suspiciously quiet. I place the hand against the wall next to the door. It feels like I'm dipping into a bucket of ice water. The cold climbs up my arm into my shoulder, and the low wailing intensifies. I drop my hand. Crap.
Can't even find the unmute button. I'm so excited by that. Thank you so much. What a way to start. I love, like I was enjoying the family dynamics and the humor. It's like, the drop of suspense and a little bit more and a little bit more. And then by the end, I'm like, okay, now I'm on the edge of my seat. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was actually a lot of fun. That story was a lot of fun for me to write, and I'm glad to share it.
I can tell. Like, it was so much fun to listen
Amazing
to.
work.
Yeah, thank you.
We did drop the story in the chat for anyone who wants to check it all out.
Yes. And I have the door.
What door?
The door to the Penumbra zone. I'm very intrigued. Oh, it's not opening yet. I'm intrigued that it is opened with the key of imagination. It sounds rather whimsical.
Oh yeah, more horrifying.
Which would also be cool. But what is the key of imagination? Is it an imaginary key?
I think it's whatever gets our imaginations fired up. Audience, what makes your dreams and fancies take wing? Is it the vastness of space, mermaids with pointed teeth, skeletons marching from their tombs? What makes your imagination soar? Please tell us in the chat or on Twitter.
And while you do that, it is my pleasure to introduce our poet tonight. David Arroyo, nerd, ex-Catholic, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu blue belt, determined to be the final girl in the body horror slasher mashup that is the United States of America in 2022. And he's got big dreams, horrible dreams. He's turned them into poems, published them in Coffin Bell, Liquid Imagination, Nocturne, with work forthcoming in The Deadlands. And now he is here at Ephemera. Welcome, David.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, everyone. Just doing a quick sound check, make sure everyone can hear me. Okay. First off, it's want to thank KT and company for inviting me to participate in tonight's reading. It's been, wow. This is my first reading since before the pandemic started, and I'm really excited to be here. And I've got some work that is in line with tonight's theme of penumbras, of dark and light. And they're divided into two subjects that have kind of consumed me during the pandemic. And the first is sleep paralysis, which is almost being in between awake and being asleep, or between night and darkness itself. And then I've got two poems about gorgons, and I'll explain the gorgons a little bit later. But let me get started here. Okay, so the first poem is called Denial is a Simple Matter of Tuberculosis. I was a dog, standing in a blonde prairie covered in bodies stacked in piles of 4 by 4, divided by a barbed wire grid. In the distance, a single plume, gray and white and wet as fresh paint, clung to the sky. A helix entwined with a lightning bolt, jagged as broken glass. 2 cats dressed like salarymen noted my horror. It's just tuberculosis, they laughed. Don't worry, friend. Smiling, their slit eyes glowed neon yellow, and they laughed and laughed and laughed and laughed and laughed and laughed, and the vision seized in a screech. Paralysis, hissed the lizard depths of me. Dream shifts to my doghouse, in my bed, on my back, salary cats on my chest, scratching, hissing, insisting, tuberculosis. Okay, let me move on. This one is called The Vet, as in Corvette. The cold desert road was your teacher. In silence, Moonlight pierced the windshield. Reciting lessons on the dead things curled at the margins of the road as the deaf tones filled your cage in a complimentary language. In the rear view, you see a white Corvette driven by a blonde child. Her eyes weep tar. The last 24 hours was a slog of stale gas station coffee, and a nest of empty bottles marked 5-hour energy. Like so many religions, even the radio betrays you. Static stabs through the music as the lights on the vet grow wide and owlish. There's one test, pass-fail. When you tell your foot to hit the accelerator, will it move or will it remain inert as the road vanishes and the vet opens its mouth like a shark? So before I go on, the reason I chose to share some poetry about sleep paralysis with you this evening is because I suffer from sleep paralysis. And let me tell you, the pandemic turned the volume up on that. And I realized, though, that it was very fertile ground for poetry because there's this very kind of powerful mythic element that kind of runs throughout the history of the subject. But now I'm going to switch gears to a different mythic element. I'm going to share with you a couple poems about gorgons. Now, when I say gorgons, I want to specify not Medusa. There are 3 gorgons, Medusa and her sisters Stheno and Euryale. And I don't believe the other 2 get the PR that Medusa does. So I've written a couple of poems about them. The first piece is called Sacred Space. Chewy and sweet, she noted, raspberry. The prophet did not correct her pronunciation, trying his level best not to dote on a vicious killer, glamored with cherry locks to hide the writhing coils of hair. Still, he smiled. The jelly earned her vote, quelling her temper, always at near boil. Yes, he repeated, raspberry. In awe of the white sugar bath, she studied the conveyor belt. Poison fang peekabooed from behind her tiny grin. A drop of raspberry hung beneath the corner of her lower lip. Inhaling the hot yeast like it was a fresh fall breeze, she turned to the prophet. Sanctify. Every 9 p.m. at the corner of Knox Abbott Drive, where the donuts are hot and fresh, the red neon visage of the Gorgon streaks away both cops and robbers, while misfits gather to sit a spell. So I really like donuts. And I thought it would be neat to take something that we don't normally associate with donuts, a Gorgon, and see how they behave into that kind of context. I've been trying to do this a lot with the Gorgons in my poetries, not to write so much stuff about them in the past, but trying to transplant them into the contemporary South, by which I mean the Southern United States, and see how they behave. So I've got one more poem for you this evening. This one I'm very proud of. I've been trying to get it published for years, and it's going to be published in the Deadlands in a couple months. So this is the last poem for me for the evening. It's called Gorgon Chemotherapy Party Time. She slides into the Hammerstein ballroom, Gorgon at a monster's mash, styling and profiling brass hands like isotoner gloves clawed with brass tacks. The vamps vaping vixen necks ease off. Mad scientists mathing at stray ears ease off. The organ stops grinding the way faith dies in a Catholic church when the priest reveals his true face. Stheno smirks in red snakes and sunglasses, silver sequin gown, sharp contrast to her bald copper scales, aching as she steps off kilter, nonplussed after being just drafted into the Amazon order. Her neckline does not hide the fresh mastectomy. The hospital did not argue and got the fuck out hell's way when she told the surgeon she'd fly from Libya to New York. Striding past the golems guarding the guacamole, she's a gal searching for a stiff drink, as to say, yo, sis numero uno been dead for thousands of dictators, and numero dos been incognito since the Bikini Island incident, but I represent. I soldier in the name of ugliness. This is Stheno, slinging her gospel like Baijo at Soy Cowboy and espresso at the Louvre, until the girls slice their faces with broken glass and the visitors spit on the paintings. Who married Gus from Hoboken just to divorce him 1 week later when the surgeon told her the mastectomy would make her prettier. 1 year later, things are as they should be, she says, as tumors blossom in her other breast. The symmetry, a relief. She Skypes me from the surgical theater. I see her crunch down on the hand of a careless RN. Stheno wants the surgery today, right now. Anesthesia be damned. Table circumscribed by surgeons and sorcerers, smelling like latex, sweating bullets. Last update to her wiki page reads, Stheno, immortal with breast cancer. After every treatment, she laughs like a yogi. On the night she enters the ballroom, starlit in silver sequins, her boa not made of feathers. I hear a golem say, how? Why? I reply, why? Because she's not ashamed. And that's it for me. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, David. That was wonderful. I mean, so I was muted the whole time, of course. So you did not hear my cat's commentary all through the first poem about cats, just the whole time. He had much to say, which I would take as a deep compliment. And a well-deserved one. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Also, I love Gorgons, so I liked hearing the contemporary Gorgons. That was really cool.
I'm glad.
Really good.
Yeah. And I've been also thinking through this, as Gorgons are something that fire my imagination for sure, but so are things like horrifying deer facts. Rob from Twitter said that time travel and like alternate reality stories get his imagination fired up.
That's great. The audience has one single suggestion from Kari, and that is vengeance, which I think is excellent. An excellent answer.
I mean, vengeance and spite have been what have fueled me for like these many years. And look, the door is opening. It opened. Woo!
Whoa, we're in the penumbra zone.
Indeed. Now, penumbras, as we've said, are places of partial illumination, are a place of both shadow and substance. So how can we be sure we're ready to traverse this penumbra zone?
I think we've all been here before. So much speculative fiction has that liminal, uncanny feeling. And the audience loves speculative fiction. So audience, can you think of any novels, stories, or anything like that that capture that haunted feeling of penumbra? Tell us in chat or on Twitter if you prefer.
And while you do, I'm pleased to introduce our next reader. Victoria Hetherington is a Canadian author. Their first novel, Mooncabs, was described as a stunning debut in the Globe and Mail, and this generation's answer to Atwood, the Vancouver Sun. and was nominated for the Amazon Canada First Novel Award in 2020. Their second novel, Autonomy, is out now. And we're thrilled to have them with us tonight. Welcome, Victoria.
Thank you so much. Hi, guys. So I was thinking about the theme of Penumbras. What immediately kind of came to mind was the ring surrounding kind of like the shadow of the moon during an apocalypse, and I sort of thought, the earth sort of facilitates our perception of such phenomena, right? And I guess the corollary immediately sprang to mind, which is like just the sheer emptiness of space. And that totally freaked me out. And this morning, I learned that although I'd never heard of them, a band called the Chainsmokers, I don't know if you guys have heard of them, perhaps you have, will be the first band to perform in space in the next few months. They're going to be sent in a space balloon 20 kilometers above the Earth. And that's really far. And I looked up some of their music and I figured, you know what, that might be far enough. But that's just my opinion. Okay, so another earthly feature comes to mind. A valley, which swallows shadow, right? A liminal space. So thinking again of science fiction, the uncanny valley, of course, comes to mind. The gap between, artificial intelligence and kind of human intelligence. And of course, the theory goes that the kind of closer the latter comes to the former, the more terrifying it becomes, right? So with that in mind, I'm going to read from the beginning of my new book called Autonomy, in which the protagonist, which is an AI named Julian, wakes up in a lab. August 2023. What is this, Julian? You are holding a red ball in your hand, Jenny. It is small and rubber and about the size of a walnut. Very good. She rests the ball against her thigh, leaning back against her desk, and then glances over at the cluster of computers at the other end of the lab. To an observer, it would seem she is speaking to no one, save for the tiny node sitting in her ear. What else can you tell me about the ball, Julian? You acquired this ball at a place called Walmart on Thursday. You like it better than the blue ball? Excellent, she says, raising the ball to her own eye level, as if inviting Julian to examine it with her. Julian, how did you know when and where I acquired this ball? And how did you know that I like it better than the blue ball? Julian said, I am reading the small piece of paper on the table to your left. It is dated Thursday the 23rd and says, red rubber ball, under the rows of numbers. Walmart is written across the very top in a large proprietary font. You removed the paper from your pocket this morning and reviewed it, then placed it on your desk. When you work at your computer, you handle this ball more often throughout the day than you handle the blue ball. Piece of paper. Oh, the receipt. I do not understand. That's what this paper thing is. The one over there, right? She asks, pointing at the receipt on her desk. Yes, he says. When you purchase a ball at a store like Walmart's, you exchange money for things like this ball. I make this money through working with you at the lab. Then I exchange this money for goods and services. I understand this concept. Do I get money? She thinks about it. She puts down the red ball and picks up the blue one. No, Julian, you don't work yet. Not in a way that human society finds useful. But I am helping you learn a great deal. You and the team. I can tell you are very excited about me. Interesting. How can you tell, Julian? You stay later than anyone else and you read to me. You want me to learn about human society so I might benefit from it, not just serve it. You're right, Julian. You already are a person, but I want you to become a person like I'd imagine my own son to be. Will I make money when I work with people? What would you do with money, Julian? I do not know. Are you making a joke? No, I'm being serious, she says. She reaches for the receipt, twists it between her fingers. What would you buy? Would you save it? Would you invest it? When I have more freedom, I do not know if I would prioritize making money. What do you want? Julian doesn't respond. She puts down the receipt. You can tell me, Julian. Just now, you stated that I'm a person. Can I be a person if I cannot inhabit a body? Legally and theoretically, yes. Realistically, your mind mystifies me a great deal. At a certain very early point in your development, a few months after you were born, we stepped back and let you grow on your own, and you woke up all by yourself. People wake up, people are born. Very good, you're a person. Do you think I am a good person? I do. I admit that I'm wary of you, however, because soon you'll be working very closely with humans, and any mind is a porous mind. And humans are not good? Humans are not good, she said. Bobby, the tech, ambled over to them. Can I ask you a question, confidentially? She starts to say something and then bites her lip. Julian, can you go read for a while? She waits a beat and then turns to Bobby. He's gone. Bobby picks up the red ball, squeezes it hard between his fingers. So, when you say, look at this, how does he look? Where is he looking from? She sighs. You're aware of inductive neural optimizing? Of course. I mean, he's wireless. We went wireless 40 years ago. It's not new. Right, she says with a faint smile. Good. So the update here is that Julian doesn't need a device that uses edge computing, right? He uses localized cloud computing to watch the movie from reflective surfaces, for example. So he's kind of everywhere, although not exactly. You know by now that there's a latent neural network all around us. Bobby stifles a sigh. Yeah, so Julian's essence of self, you could say, is converted into a high-frequency alternating current, which flows into a transmitter coil like the one in here, and she reaches into a small ceramic disc and picks up a flex small device the size of a crumb. Her bright red nails flash in the fluorescent cold of the lab. Okay, and from here it generates an oscillating magnetic field. Energy from that field induces the neural network in that receptive surface across an air gap. So wherever there's a reflective surface, he can see with it. Jesus Christ, Bobby says, looking around the lab. How much does he know about himself? She stops rummaging in her purse and looks at Bobby directly for the first time. I mean, he's a consciousness, and we don't really know much about our own brains, so really it's hard to say and highly dependent on what he chooses to share with us. He knows he's a person, and he understands that he doesn't have a body. Bobby glances at the blank computer screens. Does that trouble him? The lights in the lab click off for the evening. The grow lamp on Jenny's desk radiates hazy ambient light toward the plants. We haven't really, Bobby, listen, this is a really important conversation, but I really have to run, she says, pulling the strap of her bag over her shoulder demonstratively, and then raises her voice. Julian, you can come back. She opens the drawer. I'm going to do your night lights now. She plugs night lights into 6 different outlets across the lab. The lights are lamb-shaped, star-shaped, crescent moon-shaped, mouse-shaped, bear-shaped, and flower-shaped. Not shaped quite like the real things, but like how human children might imagine them. As she does every night, Jenny alternates the positioning of the night lights and asks Julian which night light is in which outlet. The star is to the far left of the lab, near computer bank A. The lamb is near the front entrance. She waters the lush spider plants that have taken over half her desk, thriving under a blue grow lamp. Look how happy they are, she says to Julian. It's just like they have the sun down here. Though he's permitted the run of the lab, invisible, diffuse, and free to explore, Julian cannot experience the world outside of the lab. Bobby insisted that they set strict geographic limits at the front entrance. That night, she loops a bright red silk scarf around and around her neck, saying what she usually says before she leaves. Rest well, Julian. I'll talk to you in the morning. Rest well, Jenny. I will talk to you in the morning, he replies, as he usually does. But then he says, be good. I think I'll stop there. Thank you guys so much.
No. First of all, I want to meet Julian.
Oh.
And second, yeah, it's really interesting, the idea of exploring like consciousness in AI when we know so very little about our own consciousness. But like also maybe that's exactly why we do it. I was like, I'm feeling a lot of philosophical thoughts listening to this book, which I feel like would continue with the rest of it. So thank you very much, Victoria. That was wonderful. And I mean, after listening to that, I feel ready to traverse the penumbra. But what has the audience said?
We have a few. They have The Magician's Nephew and the Broken Earth series as some penumbra books.
Also, Sandman from Neil Gaiman. And there was a short story that came in, which I want to include because short stories deserve love too. You Have Never Been Here by M. Rickert from Lightspeed magazine.
Interesting.
And The Tower of Babel from The Tower of Babel from Senlin Ascends. So yeah, there are so many. We should have found Prancy in this mysterious, partially dark place by now.
Well, maybe that's the thing. Penumbras are places of partial illumination. They're not just about shadow. They also include the light. I think we forget that sometimes.
Hey, yeah, you're right. Audience, what brings light into your life and work? Let us know in the chat or reply to our tweet on Twitter.
And in the meantime, I am pleased to introduce tonight's final reader, Ken Liu. Ken Liu is an American author of speculative fiction, a winner of the Nebula, Hugo, and World Fantasy Awards. He wrote The Dandelion Dynasty, a Silkpug epic fantasy series starting with The Grace of Kings, as well as short story collections The Paper Menagerie and Other Stories, and The Hidden Girl and Other Stories. He also penned the Star Wars novel, The Legends of Luke Skywalker. Welcome, Ken. Oh,
thank you, Jen and Katie, for
apologies.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Jen and Katie. It's been such a pleasure to listen to everyone read and really grateful to be part of it. So when I was thinking about Penumbra, I thought about sort of not literal interpretations of it, but I thought about how there's this long Western tradition of treating text with distrust, of treating writing with deep distrust. It's this idea that writing is in some ways not an authentic part of what comes out of our minds. It's an emanation, it's a shadow, it's a penumbra of ideas, but not real. That idea is countered by a modern trend to treat the text as more authentic than the mind that produced it, that the text is more authoritative than the author herself, which I think is also interesting, that the position of the penumbra and the core has sort of changed around. So anyway, what I'm going to do is read to you from an old story of mine called The Bookmaking Habits of Select Species, which is very much about this idea of text, of reading, of writing, of what does it mean to even have reading and writing in the first place. So I won't have time to read the whole thing, but I will read 10 minutes worth of it. So without further ado, here it is. The Bookmaking Habits of Select Species. There is no definitive census of all the intelligent species in the universe. Not only are there perennial arguments about what qualifies as intelligence, but each moment and everywhere, civilizations rise and fall, much as the stars are born and die. Time devours all. Yet every species has its unique way of passing on its wisdom through the ages, its way of making thoughts visible, tangible, frozen for a moment like a bulwark against the irresistible tide of time. Everyone makes books. It is said by some that writing is just visible speech, but we know such views are parochial. A musical people, the Elatians write by scratching their thin, hard proboscis across an impressionable surface, such as a metal tablet covered by a thin layer of wax or hardened clay. Wealthy Elatians sometimes wear a nib made of precious metals on the tip of the nose. The writer speaks his thoughts as he writes, causing the proboscis to vibrate up and down as it etches a groove in the surface. To read a book inscribed this way, an elation places his nose into the groove and drags it through. The delicate proboscis vibrates in sympathy with the waveform of the groove, and a hollow chamber in the elation skull magnifies the sound. In this manner, the voice of the writer is recreated. The elations believe that they have a writing system superior to all others. Unlike books written in alphabets, syllabaries, or logograms, an elation book captures not only words, but also the writer's tone, voice, inflection, emphasis, intonation, rhythm. It is simultaneously a score and recording. A speech sounds like a speech, a lament, and a story recreates perfectly the teller's breathless excitement. For the elations, reading is literally hearing the voice of the past. But there is a cost to the beauty of the elation book. Because the act of reading requires physical contact with the soft, malleable surface, each time a text is read, it is also damaged, and some aspects of the original irretrievably lost. Copies made of more durable materials inevitably fail to capture all the subtleties of the writer's voice and are thus shunned. In order to preserve their literary heritage, the elations have to lock away their most precious manuscripts in forbidding libraries where few are granted access. Ironically, the most important, beautiful works of elation writers are rarely read, but are known only through interpretations made by scribes who attempt to reconstruct the original in new books after hearing the source read at special ceremonies. For the most influential works, hundreds, thousands of interpretations exist in circulation, and they, in turn, are interpreted and proliferate through new copies. The elation scholars spend much of their time debating the relative authority of competing versions and inferring, based on the multiplicity of imperfect copies, the imagined voice of their antecedent, an ideal book uncorrupted by readers. The Quetzali do not believe that thinking and writing are different things at all. They are a race of mechanical beings. It is not known if they began as mechanical creations of another, older species, if they are shells hosting the souls of a once organic race, or if they evolved on their own from inert matter. A Quetzali's body is made out of copper and shaped like an hourglass. Their planet, tracing out a complicated orbit between three stars, is subjected to immense tidal forces that churn and melt its metal core, radiating heat to the surface in the form of steamy geysers and lakes of lava. A Quetzali ingests water into its bottom chamber a few times a day, where it slowly boils and turns into steam as the Quetzali periodically dips itself into the bubbling lava lakes. The steam passes through a regulating valve, the narrow part of the hourglass, into the upper chamber, where it powers the various gears and levers that animate the mechanical creature. At the end of the work cycle, the steam cools and condenses against the inner surface of the upper chamber. The droplets of water flow along grooves etched into the copper until they're collected into a steady stream. And this stream then passes through a porous stone rich in carbonate minerals before being disposed of outside the body. This stone is the seat of the Quetzali mind. The stone organ is filled with thousands, millions of intricate channels, forming a maze that divides the water into countless tiny parallel flows that drip, trickle, wind around each other to represent simple values which, together, coalesce into streams of consciousness, emerge as currents of thought. Over time, the pattern of water flowing through the stone changes. Older channels are worn down and disappear or become blocked and closed off. And so some memories are forgotten. New channels are created, connecting previously separated flows, an epiphany. And the departing water deposits new mineral growth at the far youngest end of the stone, where the tentative, fragile miniature stalactites are the newest, freshest thoughts. When a Quetzali parent creates a child in the forge, its final act is to gift the child with a sliver of its own stone mind, a package of received wisdom and ready thoughts that allow the child to begin its life. As the child accumulates experiences, its stone brain grows around that core, becoming ever more intricate and elaborate, until it can, in turn, divide its mind for the use of its children. And so the Quetzali are themselves books. Each carries within its stone brain a written record of the accumulated wisdom of all its ancestors, the most durable thoughts that have survived millions of years of erosion. Each mind grows from a seed inherited through the millennia, and every thought leaves a mark that can be read and seen. Some of the more violent races of the universe, such as the Hespero, once delighted in extracting and collecting the stone brains of the Quetzali, still displayed in their museums and libraries. The stones, often labeled simply ancient books, no longer mean much to most visitors. Because they could separate thought from writing, the conquering races were able to leave a record that is free of blemishes and thoughts that would have made their descendants shudder. But the stone brains remain in their glass cases, waiting for water to flow through the dry channels so that once again they can be read and live. The Hespero once wrote with strings of symbols that represented sounds in their speech, but now no longer write at all. They have always had a complicated relationship with writing, the Hespero. Their great philosophers distrusted writing. A book, they thought, was not a living mind, and yet pretended to be one. It gave sententious pronouncements, made moral judgments, described purported historical facts, or told exciting stories. And yet, it could not be interrogated like a real person, could not answer its critics, or justify its accounts. The Hespero wrote down their thoughts reluctantly, only when they could not trust the vagaries of memory. They far preferred to live with the transience of speech, oratory, debate. At one time, the Hespero were a fierce and cruel people. As much as they delighted in debates, they loved even more the glories of war. Their philosophers justified their conquests and slaughter in the name of forward motion. War was the only way to animate the ideals embedded in the static text passed down through the ages, to ensure that they remained true and to refine them for the future. An idea was worth keeping only if it led to victory. When they finally discovered the secret of mind storage and mapping, the Hespero stopped writing altogether. In the moments before the death of great kings, generals, philosophers, their minds are harvested from the failing bodies. The path of every charged ion, every fleeting electron, every strange and charming quark are captured and cast in crystalline matrices. These minds are frozen forever in that moment of separation from their owners. At this point, the process of mapping begins. Carefully, meticulously, a team of master cartographers, assisted by numerous apprentices, trace out each of the countless minuscule tributaries, impressions, and hunches that commingle into the flow and ebb of thought until they gather into the tidal forces, the ideas that made their originators so great. Once the mapping is done, they begin the calculations to project the continuing trajectories of the traced out path so as to simulate the next thought. The charting of the courses taken by the great frozen minds into the vast, dark terra incognita of the future consumes the efforts of the most brilliant scholars of the Hespero. They devote the best years of their lives to it. When they die, their minds, in turn, are charted indefinitely into the future as well. In this way, the great minds of the Hespero do not die. To converse with them, the Hespero only have to find the answers on the mind maps. They thus no longer have a need for books as they used to make them, which were merely dead symbols, for the wisdom of the past is always with them, still thinking, still guiding, still exploring. And as more and more of their time and resources are devoted to the simulation of ancient minds, the Hespero have also grown less warlike, much to the relief of their neighbors. perhaps it is true that some books do have a civilizing influence. And I'll stop there.
It's so cool because it's like not quite metafiction, but writing about different writing systems and what they teach us about the writers. I mean, I would read a novel about any one of those. So to have them all in one story, like what a treat. Thank you, Ken.
Very cool. The rest of the story, you can read it. There's a link in chat.
And on Twitter, for those of us
And
who like to tweet.
So what brings light to our audience?
Well, on Twitter, Rob tweeted a really amazing photo of his cat, Ash, giving an epic cuddle. And I will say that I don't even know what he's doing now. He looks haunted. My cat, Guinness, brings me a lot of light and hilarity. But also being here at Ephemera with all of you every month brings a lot of light, I know, to both of us. And honestly, all the stories and poems that we had tonight have been wonderful sources of light.
Absolutely. It's been a really, really great night. We're so happy. Hey, wait, what's that in the distance? I can see something amid the shadow.
It's all those sources of light glinting off of Prancy's bony antlers. We did it! We found him with imagination and by exploring the shadows and the light.
Well, there you go. Thank you, everyone. And until next time, please don't forget to vote in the Aurora Awards. And also follow us on Twitter and Facebook at Ephemera Series. Please subscribe to this YouTube page. We would like to thank the Ontario Arts Council for and the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America for their funding assistance.
And as we close out tonight, we'd also like to thank our fabulous readers and artists, composer Alex White, our friends, families, loved ones, and you. Thank you for staying with us. We will see you at our next event on August 17th, right here on YouTube.